The Tigers beat down Oklahoma, but we've got at least one thing to work on. Let's talk about it on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And if you think I've been dismissive of Sam Horn being Missouri's starting quarterback this season, well, let's get into that scenario here a little bit later in the program. Also, I want to tell you today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com. And boy, is it not nice to have Oklahoma back in the league, huh? Just beating them down in basketball, ripping their hearts out at the end of the game in football. You know, we really owed them one, by the way, after the Sooners and now current Los Angeles Laker Austin Reeves beat us in the NCAA tournament a few years ago under Conzo Martin. But, you know, Dennis Gates was happy with that game last night, and I think most Missouri fans were as well. He said there's an unbelievable energy in this city right now, and it's not just our basketball program, it's across our entire athletic department. I agree. Things are very positive for Missouri right now, and especially, well, specifically with Missouri basketball right now, all the way up to 19th in the net rating. So after the Tigers dropped a couple games in a row, of course, one on the road to Tennessee and one at home on a last-second shot to Texas A&M, well, I saw some national people putting it out there that, well, Missouri back on the NCAA tournament bubble. Well, quite honestly, I thought that was a ridiculous notion at the time. But after a blowout over OU at home, Missouri now by their lonesome in 6th place, by the way, at 7-4 in the SEC. But again, 19th in the net ranking. That's the key number to focus on there, because that's something the NCAA tournament committee looks at very closely. So are the Tigers on the bubble? Yeah, I think not. If anything, Missouri is worried about its seeding at this point. The Tigers maybe need to win another game or two to be 100% in the tournament, but at this point, the bubble, we can just completely push all of that talk off to the side, in my humble opinion. Now, everything was not perfect for Missouri yesterday. Obviously, I'm going to be really positive for the most part. But I do want to lead with something that I thought was concerning yesterday, and that's that the Missouri's inbound passing was just embarrassingly bad, I thought. Whether it was from the baseline, the sideline, I've thought in the past that Dennis Gates has been quite good, and his staff have been rather good at drawing up effective inbounds plays, especially from the baseline and especially coming out of timeouts. But yesterday, honestly, I just didn't know what the heck we were doing. We were allowing Oklahoma to be aggressive and, you know, jump into the passing lanes on those type of plays, and we just seemed incredibly passive and content to just, you know, try to fight a guy off with one arm while we stick our other big paw out in the air and just say, hey, throw me the rock, homie. I don't know. I didn't understand what we were doing in terms of out-of-bounds plays there. It was way too casual by Missouri, and, you know, not something I've really worried about in the past. I just thought it was so sort of glaringly bad yesterday that at the very least, it needed to be brought up. Now, obviously, Mark Mitchell was your headliner in this ball game. Mitchell had 25 points. It basically devolved into a Mark Mitchell dunk contest, it felt like. At one point in the first half, the Tigers were all over the rim, and honestly, I didn't understand what Oklahoma was doing defensively at a certain point. Every time Mitchell would set a ball screen, well, basically, Oklahoma would switch a guard onto Mitchell, and Missouri was quite content to just feed him the ball. And over and over and over again, Mitchell was getting fouled to the tune of 18 free throw attempts. Good Lord, that was absolutely absurd. And not exactly the most exciting basketball in the world, but it was certainly effective, no doubt about that. And I do give Gates and Missouri a lot of credit for seeing a matchup that they liked, seeing something that worked, and just attacking it relentlessly over and over again until Porter Moser at some point finally had to make a little bit of an adjustment there defensively. But obviously Mitchell with one of his best games as a Tiger yesterday, to be sure. One guy who didn't have one of his best games, though, Trent Pierce. Although it's tough to get much going when you start the game, play 2 minutes, and then never come back in. So Pierce, who is one of his last 13 from three-point range, has really seen his minutes dwindle here recently. After the Ole Miss game where Pierce played 33 minutes, didn't make a three-pointer in the game, I felt like, hey, I guess he's just a staple of this Missouri lineup right now. Gates and company must really just value what he does beyond just his floor spacing ability. But ever since then, 23 minutes, 15 minutes, 6, now just 2 minutes for Pierce against Oklahoma. That's a little bit of a trend, without a doubt. I'm certainly noticing a pattern here, and right now the pattern is it looks like Pierce is not very confident in his jump shot right now, and if he's not willing to put it up there, well, Dennis Gates is going to sit him on the bench. There is no doubt about that. And one guy who has played much better and whose shot has come along and is a similar piece is Jacob Cruz. Though Cruz only played 12 minutes yesterday, hit his one shot from downtown, just walked into a three comfortably and took it very confidently. And I think that's really the point here. I just think right now Cruz looks like the much more confident player than Trent Pierce. So I think he's getting some of those minutes without a doubt. Now, while clearly Missouri is on the right side of the March Madness bubble, when it comes to getting a top 4 seed in the SEC tournament, the double bye, well, Missouri just one game back of the tie for third place there between Texas A&M and Florida. Of course, Missouri with a win over Florida as well. So if Missouri was going to get that double bye, I think that's probably the goal if you're a Tiger fan right now. Well, you had to beat Oklahoma, and especially in retrospect, Oklahoma, which started off the season 13-0, was very good in non-conference play. They didn't play the toughest schedule in the world, but they did have impressive victories over Michigan, Louisville, and Arizona, who is still a top 15 type of team. So, but boy, as soon as SEC play started, well, the Sooners were smacked in the face of reality by the Alabama Crimson Tide, losing 107-79. And when it's come to those top teams in the conference, teams like Alabama, Missouri, Tennessee, Auburn, the Sooners have just simply not been up to snuff, sort of showing just how difficult this league really is, especially at the top of the conference right now. And on the football side of things, if you think I've been dismissive of the idea that Sam Horn could be Missouri's starting quarterback this fall, well, let's walk through that scenario coming up here in just a minute. But first, springtime, it's almost here, and that means it's time to give your home a little TLC, do some spring cleaning, and whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look, well, WayFair has everything you need and all within your budget. Get some new furniture for your space, and I'm telling you, it just makes it feel like something brand new. For me, you declutter your brain as well. There really is something for every style and every home, no matter your space or budget with WayFair. Give your home the refresh it needs with WayFair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WayFair.com. WayFair, every style, every home. So it's safe to say that Missouri did not pay Beau Pribula, the transfer quarterback from Penn State, a reported $1.5 million for the upcoming season to sit on the bench. That is a fair assessment. And yet, that amount of money does not guarantee Pribula a starting job either. It just simply means, well, he's obviously the leader in the clubhouse at the moment. He's the safe bet to be your starter. But let's play it out. Hypothetically, what if Sam Horn, well, what if he wins the job next season and it's not based on any type of injury to Pribula or anybody else? Well, that likely means that Horn has improved just tremendously. So if this does indeed happen, I'd say that's actually great news for Missouri, because that means that you've probably got two pretty doggone good quarterbacks, because unlike Horn, who does technically have some experience, he's completed 3 passes for 8 yards in his Missouri career. None of those snaps were meaningful. All of them were basically in garbage time. I don't know, maybe against South Dakota, he got some first half snaps there. I'd have to go back and jog my memory there. But regardless, in 2023, that was the only action that Horn saw, was those 5 pass attempts against South Dakota, other than one more, again, in garbage time against Arkansas to finish it off. So Pribula at least has real college football experience, if obviously it isn't very much. We're talking about a half against Wisconsin on the road, where Pribula was very impressive, and also some packages here and there for Pribula, to run packages, that type of deal. Think James Franklin for Missouri before he was the starter in 2010. But again, if this happens, that means Horn has improved tremendously, because based on what we know so far, there's a small but somewhat loud contingent of Missouri fans in my comments and mentions who say, no, I want Sam Horn to start, and I think he is going to be the starter. Well, I hate to say it, folks, but at this point, any faith in Sam Horn is based on a couple things, really. Obviously, his high school pedigree, fine and dandy, but really it's just his lack of obvious failure that I think is one of the biggest things. That's why if you're a baseball fan and you've got that big, shiny Major League Baseball prospect who's ranked top 10 in America, that type of deal, well, you get very attached to that guy, and your mind starts to wander and think, oh my God, this is the next Hall of Fame guy for the St. Louis Cardinals or whatever it might be. Well, more often than not, those prospects don't really live up to your imagination. And that's true with backup quarterbacks as well. There's that idea that, well, the backup quarterback is always the most popular guy on the roster. Unless, of course, you have, the Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson type of obvious starter. That is often the case. And I think that psychological phenomenon is very much alive with the people who are thinking that Horn is going to be the guy. They've heard all this hype for years, the high school pedigree, the arm talent, all that good stuff. They see the arm talent as Major League Baseball worthy potentially as well. Again, remember, there were people who were loudly saying that Drew Pine should have been the starter at one point last year too. And then suddenly, when he actually did get to play against Alabama in a high leverage type of situation, suddenly those people got a heck of a lot more quiet. And that's not meant to be a shot at Pine. It's just an acknowledgement of reality and a particular psychological phenomenon, which is sports fans really love to embrace the unknown. But the bottom line here is, regardless, I think if Sam Horn wins the starting job next season, again, not based on any type of injury to any of the other quarterbacks or anything like that, well, clearly that means Horn has improved pretty dramatically over the course of the past offseason. So if that's the case, that's probably great news for Missouri. It's just not something I'm going to be betting on. And let's transition back to basketball here for a bit, as once again a Missouri opposing coach, I should say, in defeat, was talking very highly of the Tigers. This time, the Sooners coach, Porter Moser, says, I really think they're a team that can make a deep, deep run. I know what Final Four looks like. Referring, of course, you may remember Porter Moser used to be the coach of Loyola Chicago when they made their deep run to the Final Four a few years ago, Sister Jean, all that good stuff. So indeed, Porter Moser does know what a Final Four looks like for sure. I will say this, Oklahoma did not look like a top 50 team yesterday. So it was good to hear that at least Porter Moser had some nice things to say about Missouri for sure. Obviously, if Missouri is going to be the best version of itself for the rest of the season. They've got to get Trent Pierce going again offensively. But you know what? Anthony Robinson still remains to be in quite a bit of a slump here to me for about the last month or so. I just feel like Robinson has not played very well, to be brutally honest. And I hate to say that because I'm a huge Anthony Robinson fan. And I think, actually Robinson's three-point shooting, if you look at it in SEC play, has been just fine. He hasn't taken very many of them lately. But especially early in SEC play, he was knocking down the outside shot. It's really the two-point offense that has escaped Robinson a little bit here. A guy who, against California, was just absolutely wearing out the Bears in the mid-range part of the game. I think Robinson has kind of gotten away from those pull-up jump shots a little bit. I don't know if that's something that maybe the Missouri coaching staff has told him to get away from, but I think that's a part of his game that was really effective that I'm not sure why he's gotten away from it, especially when you consider that at 6'2", 6'3", 180 pounds, something like that, it's going to be tough for him to finish all the way at the rim against the best competition of the Southeastern Conference, especially like teams like Tennessee, Auburn, Texas A&M, the best defensive teams of the league, that type of deal. But to me, I'd like to see Robinson get back to that pull-up game a little bit. I'm not saying that has to be his shot every single time down court, but at the very least, defenders know they have to defend his step-back three-pointer. He's pretty good at that. Well, if he can get into that mid-range, the elbow-type area of the key, I just think that Missouri and Robinson will be a lot more effective if they can do that. I even had one listener suggesting that, hey, maybe it's time to start giving T.O. Barrett some of Robinson's minutes. Perhaps, if anything, I'd like to see more of Tony Perkins. I think he's just such a steadying force for Missouri. I think he's really at the moment, if Robinson is struggling, I think really the obvious solution is just more Perkins, because as much as I like Barrett and his upside, he's such a young player, an inexperienced player, whereas obviously Perkins is the exact opposite as I believe, a fifth-year player here. Let me check that. Is this his fifth year of college basketball? Indeed it is. So yes, Perkins, a much, much more experienced player. And it's been a couple of days now since the New Orleans Saints announced Kellen Moore as their new head football coach. So what does that mean for Kirby Moore, his brother, and the Missouri offensive coordinator? Let's talk some more about that situation. But first, when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And with FanDuel, of course, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip, you can still get in on the action with a fourth quarter comeback, that type of deal, parlays, same game parlays, just so many options over at FanDuel. And I got to say, I love the live betting part because it really does just keep you into every moment of the basketball game, always looking for the angles. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. First of all, could I ride the fence any harder on this Kirby Moore topic? At first, I was saying, no, the Saints aren't going to pay him. They're too cheap of an organization, too much of a risk for his brother Kellen to take as a first-year head coach. But then, my colleague Ross Jackson over at Locked On Saints actually asked Kellen a question for me on behalf of me and you, the listener. So give Ross, my old boss, a big thanks for that. But he asked Kellen Moore about Kirby, and again, for the second time during the Super Bowl week, kind of sort of made I thought, a little bit of a wink and a nod comment, it seemed there. Basically, Kellen saying, hey, Kirby, he's going to get some really good opportunities here very soon. The first time he said it, I thought, let's not overanalyze it. But when Ross asked him, and he says basically the same thing again, now I'm going, ooh, maybe I was wrong. maybe Kirby is going to be going to the New Orleans Saints. Well, on Tuesday, Kellen was officially named the Saints coach. Here we are a couple days later now. It's about 10:20 a.m. on a Thursday as I record here. Still nothing. Nothing about Kirby, nothing about the Saints' next offensive coordinator one way or the other. And, well, Kirby, I suppose, in theory, could also be the quarterback's coach of the Saints as well. But that seems even more unlikely, again, based on the $1.3 million that Kirby is set to make as the offensive coordinator of Missouri next season. So all of this is to say, I'm still riding the fence, folks. I get to be right. No matter what happens, I get to be right. Have I covered my bases enough? But no, seriously, I think at this point, again, I'm just kind of following this, speculating here minute to minute. The longer this goes without any news, I think that's probably good news for Missouri, because you got to think, hey, if I had it in place for my little brother to join the staff, well, wouldn't that have probably happened already? Wouldn't we have gotten some indication of that? Wouldn't some kind of source leaked out to Gabe DeArmond, or, God forbid, maybe even me? You know, I mean, really, I think at this point, we probably would have heard something. Again, I'm still riding the fence. I'm not 100% sure or taking a real strong stance either way. But I got to think, if this was going to happen, again, I'm just guessing and speculating here, I would think it probably would have happened by now. And by the way, a quick shout out to the Missouri crowd yesterday. I thought a good crowd considering everything, considering it was an 8 p.m. midweek game. Snow obviously scared some travelers off, I'm sure, although the roads were fine. I'm just saying, I get it. If you decided, I'm going to decide to go to the next game or whatever, I totally get it. I just want to give credit to all the people who did come out and saw an excellent Missouri basketball team just put a thumping on our old hated rival from the Big Eight. And by the way, the student section was basically packed. Good for them. Obviously, the students have bought fully into this Missouri basketball program. And honestly, I thought the students were great last year in an 0-19 Missouri campaign where Missouri didn't even have a Kansas game to look forward to. So there wasn't even really an excuse to, hey, get your butts in the seats, that type of deal early in the season. So again, just want to give our fans a lot of credit, really. Missouri basketball has kind of an underrated fan base, in my opinion. When we're good, we come out and we pack the stands. Really impressive stuff. So tip of the cap to our fan base for sure. And by the way, one thing I noticed in warm-ups, well, in the previous game, Missouri freshman Trent Burns, who has not suited up in a game this season, has not played a minute. Well, he had been warming up in the previous game, and in this game, not only was he warming up, he had a jersey on. He was in uniform. So it could be Trent Burns at some point could see the basketball court this season. But at this point, it doesn't really matter for his redshirt status. He sat long enough that he could play every second for the rest of the year and keep his redshirt status, I do believe. So that isn't really a question. It's just more of a question of, hey, this young man who has not seen the court all year, I think he's a really interesting piece and potential talent at that size, and a guy who can knock down a shot too, by all reports. He's a really interesting talent, but this season, I don't see him actually being a piece this year. Now, next season, could it be him and Peyton Marshall as your Missouri centers? Maybe. I think it's more likely that the Tigers probably go into the portal and get another center, just because, as we've seen, Dennis Gates loves him some experience. And with all that said, thanks especially to you everydayers out there for being patient with me this week. I know I missed the last couple days of shows. What can I tell you? Dad duty calls on occasion. But you know what? I'll have another show for you tomorrow, previewing Missouri's next ball game, an important road tilt at Georgia coming up on Saturday. So I'll have that for you, a post-game show on Saturday for you as well. So until next time, I am John Miller. Thanks for listening to Locked On Mizzou.